I know our group is small, but I want to welcome you this morning to our presentation about program review. Program review is very, very important for institutions, for the state, for the integrity of our colleges and universities. There are many times through the life of an academic program that it is reviewed, and that's what we want to talk about today. We'll take you from initial program review, a new program that is being reviewed and approved, all the way through post-audit, all the way through possible termination of a program. So we're going to be talking about that this morning. My name is Kathy Butler. I'm the former Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs for the Higher Education Policy Commission, and with me is Dr. Mark Stotler. And Mark Stotler is also in our academic division at the Higher Education Policy Commission. He handles most of the program reviews once we've got past the initial approval. So he's going to be jumping right in and talking today too. Program review is legislated, and the role of the Board of Governors is legislated. On your handout, we give you the citation for West Virginia Code. It's West Virginia Code 18B1B4 and 18B2A4, and it talks about how the Board of Governors is responsible for the integrity of the program and the ongoing review and monitoring of all your academic programs. So your role is important. It's not one that you can just say to the staff and faculty at your institution that it's their job. You, in fact, have a role as well. And so that's one of the many things we want to talk about today. Let's begin, first of all, with, Mark, you've got the next one. Let's start with initial or new program review. New program review is exactly that. If your institution wants to create and offer and implement a new academic program on your campus, then it has to go through this process. The only exceptions are Marshall University and West Virginia University, which statutorily do not have to go through this unless it is a program they're going to offer at a new location. Then it does go through this process. Okay, that's the only caveat there. It begins with something called intent to plan. The intent to plan is a document that is outlined, and its components are outlined in Series 11, which is a rule on the Higher Education Policy Commission website. It will tell you exactly what has to be in that intent to plan document. The intent to plan document is not a huge, lengthy document, but yet it contains a lot of detail. In that document, you'll talk about the reason for the need for the program. You'll talk about the cost of the program. You'll talk about how you plan to deliver it. Some of the basic things about that, how it relates to your mission. That intent to plan is not necessarily approved by the Board of Governors. That is sent to our office by your academic vice president or your president. Basically, they're asking permission from the commission to begin the planning process for a new program. We look to see that it's consistent with the mission of the institution. And if there are specific questions or red flags that come up, we also talk to them about that. For example, one of the things that Series 11 says is that there should not be duplication of programs at the same location. So let's say, for example, that two different institutions wanted to offer a criminal justice program in Elizabeth, West Virginia. Elizabeth is a very small county seat in the state of West Virginia. There would be no need for two different institutions to be there competing with each other. So that would be a red flag. So we'd be looking for any kind of those red flags that might come up. Once that intent to plan is reviewed by the staff in the Academic Affairs Office, a letter of approval to pursue the development of an academic program is sent to the institution president by the commissioner, or by the chancellor, excuse me. It comes from the chancellor of the Higher Education Policy Commission. That intent to plan should be received in the Academic Affairs Office a year before the new program is going to be implemented, or you hope to implement that new plan. We try to turn those intent to plan reviews around very quickly, usually within a week or at the latest 2 weeks from the time that we get them. So we try to get those back to you at your institution. Once you've received the permission to develop a plan, then that's when the hard work begins. That's the work that is detailed again in Series 11. There are a number of components that have to be addressed. We look at the curriculum. We look at alignment with accreditation. We look at faculty qualifications. We look at the cost of and student enrollment projections. We look at all those kinds of things. But the work begins on the campus. Needs to begin in the academic division, whatever that might be. It may be in arts and sciences, if it's mathematics, or whatever division it is on your particular campus. It begins with faculty. Faculty develop the program proposal. They develop that, and once it has been developed on your campus, then it needs to go through your campus approval process, which in most cases includes a curriculum committee. It includes a faculty senate so that faculty across campus are aware of what you're doing. It usually it needs to eventually go through the Board of Governors. It needs to have your approval. Now let me ask you, why would you need to know? Because you are committing to a new program. You're asking the commission for the permission to implement a new program, and with new programs come cost. And if some of you were in this previous session just a moment ago, they were talking about budgeting and how to be fiscal sound on your institution. So you need to know those kinds of things. We have on occasion, since I've been in my position, we have on occasion received some program proposals directly from faculty and spent extensive time looking at those and reviewing those, only to find out that the president didn't know anything about it. And certainly the Board of Governors didn't know anything about it. So now, even though it's not specifically outlined in Series 11, we require that there is a letter from the chair of the Board of Governors endorsing the new proposal and the submission of that new proposal. Once that proposal comes to our office, we review it. We review it according to the guidelines that are in Series 11. And on your handout, there is a website address there if you want to look and see all the different components that are needed there. We review it. We give feedback to the institution. We work through the academic vice president at that point. Many times, there are small tweaks that need to be made to the program, some pieces that may have been omitted that need to be corrected or inserted in the program proposal, and then it's resubmitted. I mean, it's a pretty informal process at that point. Once we have given it an okay in the Academic Affairs Office, then we find what we call an out-of-state content expert. We look around the United States, and we go many states away oftentimes. We find somebody who has expertise in that content area, usually a dean or director of a similar program that is accredited. And we try to find those kind of programs in institutions of like size, with like resources. We send that proposal out and have it reviewed by that out-of-state expert that has no dog in the fight, no competition for the same students. And we get those comments back usually within 3 weeks or a month from the time that it's submitted to that out-of-state consultant. Once those comments come back, they are shared with the institution anonymously. The folks at the home institution that have submitted that program proposal never know who that consultant was. And we share those. Then, one thing that we found, especially in the last year or so, is that many times the suggestions of that external consultant are taken very, very, very seriously. There may be a change in a course. There may be an addition or deletion to a course. There may be a little more alignment with accreditation standards, but there's usually some follow-up on the campus once you've gotten those consultant reports back. Because that's your opportunity to make your program the very, very best that it can be before it goes for final approval. Because once it's finally approved, that's the way it is. So we try to make sure that we have all those pieces taken care of. Once we have final approval the final copy from the institution, then it's sent back into the Academic Affairs Office, and we bring it forth to the commission. At that point, they get our recommendation, and we defend that to the Higher Education Policy Commission for approval. Sometimes people wonder, why does it take so long? It's because we want to, it doesn't sit on our desk. It's because we really want to make sure that whatever program is approved in the state is of high quality and it's the very best it can be from the very beginning. And that's why we do that. Are there questions about that piece? Yes, sir.
You know, we have done a lot of program approvals, and as a board member, I think this is one of the trickiest things because every program sounds great when it's presented.
Yes.
No one said, they're all wonderful. So you're sitting there as a board member, I'm getting the questions I should be, or the issues I should be looking at is, what is the cost, and how will that fit into the mission of the university? And just being aware that this is being proposed. What questions should I be asking as a board member to really drill down?
Okay, and the question is, what kinds of questions should you ask as a board member? You want to know about the cost. You want to know how many, and when you talk about cost, oftentimes faculty say, well, we already have people with those qualifications, so it's not going to cost us anything. Wait a minute, aren't they teaching a full-time load already? That's a question you need to ask, okay? What are you going to give up to do this? If it's a zero cost, you've got to give something to get something. You ask those kind of questions. You ask, is it aligned with accreditation standards? Will it be eligible for national accreditation? There are accreditors for almost every content area now. Not everyone, but most of them. So you ask that question, is it aligned with accreditation standards? How about the cost? How many students is it going to take to sustain the program and the cost of the program? You know that the first few years, the institution is going to have to bear the brunt of the additional cost. Can you afford to do that? It may be a really good investment because you know that this is a need. Always ask, can you show me proof of a need for this course? It's not just because Professor X has expertise in European literature and now we're going to have a major in European literature, because that person could be gone next year. Then what? It can't just be based on somebody's desire to have a new program. You need to show that there are students that are interested in this program. And one of the things that I would warn you about is you don't just want word of mouth. You want a survey, you want a U.S. Department of Labor statistics that show that this is a career area that is of need and is growing exponentially, and you have a need for that. You probably want to ask, what other institutions in the state are you competing with? And if you're within 50 miles of another institution, they already have this program, is there a need for two programs? Sometimes it's not so much that you want to add new programs, it's better to build on the programs that you have. You might want to start with a minor in that area instead of a major or a new degree program. Minors can be added at the institution without Higher Education Policy Commission approval. You can do that. And a minor does not take nearly the commitment that a major program would. So those kind of questions, if you would, I don't want to go through all the details necessarily right now, but if you would go to the HEPC website and under Rules and Policies, under Resources, Rules and Policies, go to Series 11. It will tell you exactly what the institution has to submit, and that will give you some of those questions. So delve deeply. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Now, when you're talking about duplication, now with so many programs being online, do you look at that, whether there are programs that are reaching the people that the new program would just be taking from them?
Yes, it doesn't matter necessarily the delivery mode so much, because we have an inventory of all approved programs in the state. So we can see that, in fact, let's say, for example, Bluefield State College had an online course, one of a kind, whatever it might be. They had an online course that was reaching the entire state. Now, would there be a need for another online course? Maybe or maybe not. It depends how full that enrollment would be. If it looked like there was a real need for that, yeah. But it would raise the question at least. It's not necessarily a yes or no, but it would raise the question. We'd have to take a look at it. Yes, sir. Another question.
The process that you described, is that
Yes, sir. Just to make sure everybody got it, is the process the same for undergraduate and graduate? Yes, it is. With one extra addition to that. If you are offering graduate programs at your institution, you need to make sure that that graduate program is approved by the Higher Learning Commission, your regional accrediting agency in Chicago. The way that that process works is you get it approved through the Higher Education Policy Commission of West Virginia first. And then once that is approved, and it is always proved contingent upon approval by the Higher Learning Commission, then you apply with the Higher Learning Commission for the additional graduate degree. Until you have a number of graduate degrees at your institution, you cannot automatically add another one. Now, Marshall and WVU would be different because they have a number of graduate degrees. But for the other baccalaureate programs that are just getting into graduate education, yes, you would have to go through that additional step before you can implement. Are there other questions? It is a lengthy process. We suggest a year from the time that you want to implement. If you wanted to implement a new program next fall, then you need that intent to plan in now. I'd like to say it goes faster, but you can see why. We really scrutinize it and we work with you. We try to move it through as quickly as we can. And we do have a new approval process that has a modification that was approved by the commission a couple meetings ago, wasn't it? 2 meetings ago, Mark? That allows the chancellor to approve the program without taking it to the full commission if it falls between the quarterly meetings of the commission. So if, for example, West Virginia State University wanted to implement a program fall 2014 in 2 weeks, and it didn't get finished in time and ready for the commission, for this current commission meeting, in time to get on the agenda, but it's been ready for 3 weeks, but it couldn't make the agenda by that deadline, then the commissioner or the chancellor can actually go on and approve it. Now what he does is he notifies the commissioners, gives them about 48 hours to look at it, and if there are no substantive comments or nothing, no problem with it, then he can go on and approve. So we try to work with the institutions and get those programs approved as quickly as we can because we know it's important to the institutions. So, once a program is approved, part of the resolution for that agenda item will say approved for implementation on a certain date. It will say that if not implemented within 2 years from the time the commission acts on it, then you have to come back and go through the process of approval again. The reason for that is because we found that there had been some institutions who had who had programs that had been approved by the commission 5-6 years ago that had changed their minds and didn't want to implement them, but the status, the fiscal status of the institution had changed. The faculty had changed. Lots of things had changed within that 5 years, and so it needed to come back. So we say now 2 years. We'll take a look at it again if you haven't implemented within 2 years. 3 years after approval by the commission, your program will be reviewed by a post-approval audit process. And that's just to check to make sure that the implementation is going smoothly, that students are being enrolled. And with that, I'm going to let Dr. Stotler talk about the post-approval audit. Dr. Stotler?
I just want to add a little bit to what she just said. You asked the question about the questions you should ask. One of the big initiatives in the last few years has been on college completion. West Virginia has one of the lowest percentage of the population with a degree in the country. And in that effort, because we don't have that many traditional students, that age population is dropping, we're looking a lot more at adult students. Many of these adults have been in college before and have dropped out and have lots of college credit, but no degree. So if you have programs that are being proposed that maybe are geared more toward those adults, you might want to ask questions about delivery, whether those programs are going to be delivered at times, at places that are convenient for adults. If you're trying to attract adults and you're offering them 9 to 5 on a college campus, that may not be the best thing to do. So that's just a kind of another question you can ask.
That's a very good point. We received a program, we're working with an institution as they're developing a program right now. And we met with them just this past week, and in that program, they said they were developing this program for practicing nurses to take them to the next level from an RN to a BSN. Well, if they're practicing nurses, they are working during the day. But when they set up the program, they set it up for 15 hours every semester. If you're working full time, I don't think you can do 15 hours a semester. So that's one of those examples of the kinds of things that you really need to think about. And if you're working with working adults, how do you monitor that? How do you set up that program in a format that they can get those courses they need in the timely fashion so that they're not there for years and years and years? How do you get them through the program? Dr.
Okay.
Stoller.
Moving on to post-approval audit. Kathy mentioned that. This is a relatively new process that's just began in the last few years. The Commission decided, once they approve a program, they don't want to just forget about it. And so when a program is approved now, it goes on a table to remind us to look at it again in 3 years after approval. We've only had 3 so far. We've got 7 due this year. So you may be on some campuses that I'm expecting to receive reports actually this month. The purpose of the post-audit basically is to verify progress and implementation, and also to ascertain that the program that's being implemented looks somewhat like the program that was approved. And that's not always true. The policies that the audit should include a number of issues. Again, this is a series 11, the policy that Kathy has been talking about, and you can go on to the website and look at that policy and see the issues that they are to address in the report that comes to us. We have developed a format that we share with the institutions when they are ready to report on those programs. I will say that the rule is silent about your role in reviewing those audits. It does not say that it has to go through you. As a board member, I think I would want to see those audits. One, you become more familiar with the program, and you approved the program initially, so you may want to see how that program is doing in 3 years. So again, as board members, I think you need to talk with your president. If you're not seeing those reports, you may want to see those before they come to the commission. And then it's only an information item to the commission. They do not approve it. It's just kind of it's kind of an information item to let us know how things are progressing. It's very simple. Any questions on the post-approval audit?
That's 3 years once something has been approved. Then we have another round of program reviews every 5 years. And a 5-year review is for all programs, not just those who have been recently approved. It's set up on a cycle that is established by the institution so that all institutions are reviewed within the institution on a 5-year cycle. There are specific guidelines in Series 10 that talk about how that process is to be set up on your campus. Your institution should have established a policy and a process for instituting that program review. Then, so your institution should have that process in place. Let me share how some of that begins. Your academic affairs officer, your vice president for academic affairs, your provost, should be working with your division chairs, your deans of your colleges to make sure that every program is reviewed on a 5-year cycle. That cycle should be available for your purview. You should be able to see that cycle and see what courses are up for this year, what are up for next year. As the institution begins that review, it begins with the faculty in the individual division and works its way through the campus all the way to your approval before it comes to Dr. Stotler. And Mark, do you want to talk about?
Well, first of all, I want to, we talk about programs and everybody thinks, okay, I know what a program is. That's not always true. We have a statewide program inventory. And those are the programs that come to the commission, get approved, get placed on this inventory, and that is your official inventory. However, you have lots of other programs that are not on that inventory, and it gets real confusing. Once a degree program is approved, and I'm going to use an example here for business. Somebody starts a new business program. Well, under business, you may have various what we call majors under business. You may have accounting, you may have economics, you may have management, but they're not discrete programs. They're all under the big umbrella of business. So that program review is for business in general and not separate program reviews for all those majors underneath that umbrella. Now, a school like WVU and Marshall, many times, they got enough population and enrollment that there'll be discrete programs. They'll have a program in accounting, a program in management, a program in finance. For the smaller state colleges, the old state colleges and universities, it's difficult to have discrete programs because you don't have enough mass of students to justify having those programs. So we say program review, not everything gets reviewed discretely. Sometimes they're part of a larger review. Kathy talked about the format in Series 10. It talks about the elements that are to be included in the process that you use on your campus. Again, they're in Series 10. You can add other things that you feel are important. So you're not limited to what's in the policy. The policy just guarantees a floor of information that they want to make sure it's being reviewed. The policy says that you are to use a reviewer external to the academic unit being reviewed. Now, we encourage that you use reviewers external to the institution, but it's not mandated. But at least, minimally, you have to have somebody that is external to that unit looking at it. You're also to have a committee on campus that reviews those program reviews before they're sent to you. So there should be several layers before you ever see it. But you are responsible for making the recommendation to the commission on all these existing programs. Like Kathy said, all programs have to be reviewed on a 5-year cycle. Most institutions, I think, try to take their programs and divide them 20% each year, and you get to 100%. You don't have to. If for some reason you're heavy one year and the next year you don't do any reviews, that's your prerogative. You can, as long as every program gets reviewed at least once every 5 years, you're going to satisfy both the statutory and the policy requirements. Now, your recommendation that comes to the commission, you've got several choices that are in the policy. You can continue the program at its current level of activity without or with specific action or follow-up reports. You can continue that program at a reduced level of activity. You can identify that program for further development. You can recommend discontinuing the program. So those are your major options, and not only do we want the recommendation, but the rationale you used for making that recommendation. When we did this statewide several years ago, before it came back down to the institutions, we had the option that institutions could designate a program for excellence, and we had special criteria for that. I wish I could say that if it's an excellent program that we can give it a ton of money to, but it's more of a kind of an attaboy. And some institutions are still utilizing that designation of excellence. Others are not. That's your choice. If you decide that some programs, it makes them feel good, and unfortunately, we don't have the extra money to really to honor them.
One other thing, Mark, I'd like to share about 5-year review is the role of assessment in 5-year review. Anytime that a program is being reviewed, there should be some assessment as to student outcomes. Is your program accomplishing what it is supposed to accomplish? Are your students learning what they need to learn? Are those graduates being placed? Do they have jobs? Is it still a viable program? Those kind of things. Take a look at that, and based upon that assessment, if there are issues that have been discovered in that review process, see if the faculty have made changes or proposing changes in the program to address those needs. That's always a very important part too. Another piece of that external review or the whole program review process is the use of an advisory committee. I would highly suggest that you encourage your departments to have advisory committees made up of folks from industry, from business, from recent graduates, folks that can give your program a good look based upon what it's supposed to do for your area. for the economic engine of the area. So all those kinds of things. So the more people that are included in that process and give you feedback, the better off you'll be. We have a question?
Does the board need approval to terminate a program?
Oh, we'll get to that one. The question is, do you need approval to terminate a program? And we'll come to that in just a moment.
One of the elements that should be in your review, and it's in the reports that comes to us, is that since these programs are on a cycle being reviewed every 5 years, that means you have some data to look back on. So I would strongly suggest that you look at a previous review, what issues were identified then, and ask what kind of improvements have been made to take care of those deficiencies that may have been identified 5 years ago. I mean, so you don't want to forget about a program review once you've done it. Issues sometimes stay, and if they haven't been corrected, then I might be asking why.
Focus program review?
Yeah. Again, this is very minor. This is actually just a small component of Series 10 on program review, and it provides the flexibility for the commission and or the Board of Governors to have focus program reviews. We haven't done any recently. Those focus program reviews for the commission in the past, actually before the commission, it was a different body at that time, but they were interested in all chemistry programs in the state, or all biology programs. And so we brought in external consultants, and we went around the state and looked very closely at all of those programs, particularly their lab facilities and things like that. You could do a focus review on a specific component of program review. Kathy mentioned assessment. You could decide, we're worried about assessment in all of our programs, and so we're going to do a focused review on the assessment process and plans that are being followed by all of our programs. So again, it's just another tool at your disposal. I don't know that it's being used much, or if it's been used at all at the institutional level, but we have used it at the state level, but it's been a number of years.
I think if a Board of Governors had a concern about any program, I would encourage you to do a focus program review on campus and look at your program in detail, just like you would with a 5-year program. You get to choose the parameters of that, but that would be if you had some concerns or if you had heard some issues about a program, or if the numbers of students enrolled in that program has dropped off, which is the next kind of program review that we do, and it's a productivity review. Mark, you're on again.
We're all concerned about whether a program has enough students to sustain the program. And so the commission here several years ago decided to add a component to program review called a productivity audit. And what we do is, based on the data that is submitted to us, we run a program that looks at the number of graduates and enrollment in every program in the state. And there are thresholds that a program has to meet. For example, this is a 5-year average for baccalaureate programs. On a 5-year average for degrees awarded, should be 5. And for enrollment, it's 12.5. So if a program fails to meet both of those standards, then they are placed on probation. Now, for that step, though, we do identify those programs to the institutions, and they can request that that program be exempted from probation. And we may occasionally have allowed that, but for the most part, we say, nah, let it go on. So once a program is placed on probation, they have 4 years to address the issue of viability, do something to increase the enrollment, to increase the number of graduates in that program. After 4 years, we'd make that run again. And if the program still cannot meet both those standards, if it meets one standard, they're fine. But if they miss both the standards, then after 4 years, the commission will recommend to you that the program be terminated. We do not terminate, you terminate. And you may ignore us and decide that the program is critical to the mission and choose to keep it. And if so, it stays on the inventory and we move on. It may get caught again. This process occurs every 2 years. So every 2 years we do this process. So right now we're in the middle of a probation period, and we'll see here fairly soon. We did lose some programs at the last cycle. some programs were terminated before they even got to that 4-year probation. The institutions decided we're not going to make it, and it's not important to us, and so that you all terminated programs before they even got to that 4-year mark. So again, it's just another way of being concerned about the resources that we have, and so we want to make sure those programs are full of students.
One thing we might mention is the Commission makes recommendations to the Board of Governors. This is to answer your question about termination. We do not terminate your programs. You have the authority to terminate your programs, and only you can terminate those. You know, I think the program review gives you the documentation. The productivity review gives you documentation, so there are already a couple ways there. Besides any kind of focused program review that you might choose to do would give you additional documentation. And you at your campus, I'm very confident, have a process already in a policy about how those programs are terminated. And when you do terminate those programs, there are specific things that you need to address, and we'll come to those in just a moment. But yes, it is your role to terminate the programs if you see that they need to be terminated. We also do review of graduate programs. And again, graduate programs are just a little bit different, and there's a reason we do graduate programs differently, but Dr. Stotler, again.
This is not a full review like these other reviews we've been talking about. A little over 10 years ago, all graduate programming in West Virginia was offered only by West Virginia University and Marshall. So none of the other schools could offer, were even allowed to offer graduate programs. The legislature decided in their infinite wisdom that there were areas of the state that were not being served well in the graduate program area. And so they authorized some of the former state colleges, now Millennium or universities, to begin offering graduate programs. In doing that, they also placed in the code an annual report on those programs. It's not a detailed report, it's more kind of a viability. They want information about how many programs there are, how many students are there, how many they're graduating. It's not really it's not a qualitative review at all. It's just type of a monitoring kind of thing. I just gave a report to the Commission yesterday. The first year, in 2002, 2003, that this was implemented, we had 5 graduate programs offered by the former state colleges. Now they have been approved for up to 20 programs. So there is a significant amount of graduate programming going across the state now that wasn't going on 10 years ago.
Absolutely, lots more graduate programs, but that would make your role a little more important too as far as monitoring the graduate programs. You know, most schools want to get into graduate education, but you need to make sure, again, that those are that the numbers of students that are needed for those programs are there, and that in fact you're maintaining your enrollment. There may be a program that is really important right now, but 5 years from now you may have saturated the market and you don't need that program anymore. So you need to be flexible that way too and look at what's out there. And so when these graduate reports are done, graduate program review, ask for those data as well so you can take a look at them too just to see that your programs are being maintained at the level they need to be.
I think it's interesting, the bulk of the enrollment in the graduate programs are in the areas of teacher education and business. Those are the popular programs, and the schools that have decided to focus on those programs are seeing significant enrollment. We have at least one institution, for some reason, decided to focus more on niche program. They did not decide to go into teacher education or business. They've gone into what I consider, again, more niche programs. And they may be good, solid programs, but they're not bringing in heavy enrollment. So if the goal was to increase the enrollment of the institution, those graduate programs are having very little impact on enrollment.
And when you're offering graduate programs for the first time, and you just have a small number of graduate programs, every time you add a graduate program, again, it has to go back to the Higher Learning Commission, your regional accreditor. So you need to choose those programs carefully. They don't necessarily just say, okay, you can have 3 programs, you can have 5 programs. They approve that program by program. So, make sure that the programs that are being approved are programs that you need in your area for your institution. And lastly, program termination. There are times that you need to terminate a program. We've spoken a few moments about that. It's a difficult thing to do, but as you do that, a president cannot terminate the program. Only the Board of Governors can terminate the program. It's your role. Obviously, you're going to have the recommendation from the administrators at your institution, but it's your role to do that. There are things that need to be taken care of. You need to make sure that the students who are currently enrolled in the program have some kind of teach-out process so that they are taken care of. You don't just terminate a program and say, okay, go find another program someplace. That's not going to work. You need to have a teach-out process for those students, whether it's a cooperation with another institution or you may say this year you won't have any more freshman courses, and next year you won't have any more sophomore courses in that program, and you may have to go out on a phase-out process. But anyway, you need to make sure that all those details are taken care of. You need to look at the feasibility and the financial stability of that program, and how's that going to impact your institution. If you're going to discontinue a program that costs a lot, and you're going to do that because of the cost, look at how that's going to impact your institution. It may impact you on the number of students enrolled. It may impact you on facilities. There's just lots of issues. There are lots of reasons why you might or might not terminate a program. Once the Board of Governors has decided to terminate a program, however, they are to notify the Chancellor. The Chancellor will in fact notify the Commission. We need to make sure that we know that so that we're not advising students to go to your institution for that program, or so that we can handle any questions that might arise. It also will change the program inventory, program degree inventory that Dr. Stotler mentioned. If you're ever interested or you want to know, you want to start a program in petroleum engineering and you want to know where it's offered in the state, you can go on our website under resources and look up degree inventory, and it will show you every place in the state that any program is offered. It's there. Mark, you want to take questions?
Yeah. Well,
Actually, a follow-up on the teach-out thing.
the practice in West Virginia for our public institutions is they teach out themselves. They just keep the faculty around and the course is up until the students in the pipeline. Now, the problem becomes if you get students that for some reason are straggling and it may be difficult to get them out, but we have not typically have gone out and utilized other institutions.
Do you have problems with faculty quitting because they know that they're not going to be around in a year or two?
Absolutely. If the boat's going down, they don't want to be the last one off the boat.
Right.
And so if you're going to phase out a program, generally faculty will get concerned about that, as they should, and some will leave the institution. One thing that can be done is faculty often can teach in more than one area. So as much as possible, if you can retrain or help that faculty member get some extra credentials so they can move over to another area over a period of time, some of your faculty are place-bound. They're in your area because that's where they live, that's where their family is. They don't want to go someplace else. So to help those faculty, I think is just good business too. But you ask about the teach-out. It can be done many ways. It can be done over a period of time if you have another institution in close proximity, or if there are online courses from another institution, you can work out an arrangement there where that student may take a course at another institution for the same rate, the same tuition rate that you would offer. There's lots of things that you can do. It's a difficult situation, but your eye has to be on the student. That's the important thing. I have a question right over here first.
In terms of program approval or termination, how would a situation such as Mountain State University be handled? Would the courses in either approval for University of Charleston to take over be coupled together in one big approval, or would they be handled separately, or how did that work out, since we're on this subject?
All right, the question has to do with an institution that closed down in recent years in West Virginia, and how are those courses translated to another institution? That becomes very difficult. Our office worked directly with the Higher Learning Commission in Chicago to work out reciprocity agreements between our institutions and Mountain State University, which closed. our eye again was on the students and what was best for the students. It wasn't an open window. We gave them about 12 months to get started in another institution, and there was some leniency and some flexibility in transfer policies in that period of time. For example, there might be at a baccalaureate receiving institution, they may say you have to have X number of degrees from that institution to graduate from that institution. But you have someone who's a senior at this institution who's closing down. Do they have to go extra semesters to graduate someplace else? And those flexibilities gave us the opportunity to allow those students to graduate from the receiving institution. So we did some things like that. Our office did work with that. We try right now, because of that terrible situation that happened, our office has been trying to work more with the publics and privates both. Now we have authority through the legislation that was passed in 2013 for something called reauthorization. And that's every year we look at specific data points. And if there's an issue, and some of you were in a session yesterday with the commission, you might have heard about some of that. If we see issues that are of concern to us, then we can go out and red flag those. We can go out and do on-site visits. We can support that institution, even if it's a private, or even if it's a for-profit. We can do that to try to assist that. The idea is not, do they make money on the institution or not, but rather, we have West Virginia students who are, West Virginia residents who are students of that institution. What can we do to help those students? And that's what we're trying to, so we've tried to do that. So your question about transfer and hours and that, we try to intervene and try to facilitate that somewhat. But thank you for that question. Sir?
We always receive recommendations on the intent to plan, and we go through the approval process as you described. However, should not we also receive recommendations from the provost as to termination as well? Or are you saying it's left up to us in our reviews to identify that only?
You're going to get, the question for those in the back, do you depend on the academic vice president or someone to give you a recommendation to terminate, or is it the role of the board to come up with that recommendation themselves? I think you're going to get recommendations from several areas. One is in program review. When you do the 5-year program review cycle, that's to go through a committee process on your campus. It comes up through the academic vice president to the president and then to you. That has a recommendation on it before it gets to you.
Yeah, there's no question about it there.
Okay.
And of course, everyone thinks that that program is justified.
That's why you use the external consultants.
They think it's justified. So, and you miss a lot. I mean, you're only reviewing those programs every 5 years. So in between, there's a lot can happen.
That's true.
Why I'm asking. I mean,
Can you so the question is, can you do it without that recommendation from the academic vice president?
where's the process other than those 5-year reviews? I mean, where else can you catch that?
You can also catch that with your Higher Learning Commission accreditation visits. I would specifically look at assessment and quality of programs. There are 2 criteria that the Higher Learning Commission has 5 basic criteria. 2 of them have to do with teaching and learning. One has to do with the mission of the institution, one has to do with the integrity of what you're doing, the other has to do with finances. But 2 of them have to do with teaching and learning. And there are reports that are prepared by the folks at your institution about that. Many of our institutions are on what they call pathways now, where you decide what direction and what special initiatives, what kind of things do you want to improve at your institution. Keep an eye on that. That will give you some information about it as well. You'll see some programs that are struggling and some that are doing very well. So, you might just ask your academic vice president to make recommendations or talk about specific programs. At a former institution where I was, when I was an academic vice president, we began a process that at every board meeting, we talked about a different academic program, or 2 or 3 of them. You couldn't talk, you didn't want to take hours, but you had 10 minutes to talk about the highlights and the issues, the struggles, the strengths, the weaknesses, and just to update the board. That might be something you might want to consider. That would give you some insight.
The other aspect, and many institutions doing this, you're not limited to every 5 years. Many times the recommendations that we get are that a program is continued, but we request a follow-up report in 2 years. 1 year, 2 years, whatever. So if you've got a program that we're not quite sure, there's some issues there, you don't have to wait 5 years. You can require an interim report before that. So that's what I would do. If there's a program out there that's kind of iffy, well, don't just let it go for 5 years.
Well, no question, and we do that. Sometimes we review it the next year again to see if there's any progress being made. Okay.
You know, I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here, but I would say that if a board has a concern about any program and you wanted someone other than someone at your institution to review it, contact the Academic Affairs Office at HEPC.
Okay.
You know, we can come up, you know, or we can have somebody take a look at things for you.
Yeah, the key concern was identifying
Yes.
those areas that need termination somewhere between that 5-year review.
Right.
And
There's one other source that we've not talked about at all, and that's graduate follow-up. And that's one of those things that's usually required as a piece of your accreditation for any individual program accreditation, like business accreditation or engineering or teacher education. They require a graduate follow-up. And in that graduate follow-up, they ask about the quality of the program. There should be a document that's produced each year on your campus about what are your graduates saying about your programs. That could give you some key information too. Are there other questions? Well, I sincerely appreciate your commitment to your institutions, to be the best that you can be and to have your institution to be the best that it can be. It's not an easy job. It's not just a position that you go and you sit in a meeting for a while and then you go home and never think about it again. There's lots to it when you're a Board of Governors member. And I just want to thank you for the time that you've given to your institution, the state of West Virginia, but most of all, to our students.
The better job you do will keep us out of your affairs and make your presence much happier. If you're doing a good job with your program reviews and everything, then all we're getting is continue and everything's fine, then we're away. But you know, if issues start cropping up, they're not taken care of, then all of a sudden we're going to start coming around and asking questions. So help your president, because they don't want us around.
At any time, if we can be of assistance to you, don't hesitate. I have the email address up here and the phone number to the office and Dr. Stotler's email. So if you have any questions, if we can help you in any way, that's what we're for. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.